naming each ridge we had crossed while the fire crackled. Speculative. Adjective. Built on guesses rather than solid proof. Speculative rumors about buried treasure had the whole village probing the dunes with sticks. Defer. Verb. To delay an action or decision until later. They chose to defer the renovation until spring, when contractors were available and the supply costs were less unpredictable. Disseminate. Verb. To spread information or ideas widely. Folk songs disseminated the news of the fair long before printed handbills reached the villages. Cupidity. Noun. Greedy desire, especially for money or gain. Cupidity made him grab too many free samples until the paper bag tore on the walk home. Rigor. Noun. Careful strictness and thoroughness in method or thinking. The field guide's rigor showed in its sketches of bark and seeds, so you could identify the tree even after the leaves had fallen. Fractious. Adjective. Irritable and likely to argue. The committee grew fractious after hours in a stuffy room, so the chair called a short break and reopened the discussion with a single question everyone could answer. Redundant. Adjective. Duplicate, serving no extra purpose. Wearing two raincoats felt redundant once the storm stopped, so he shed the inner one. Prioritize. Verb. To decide what is most important and handle it first. To prioritize effectively. She listed what would break if ignored, then tackled those items before returning to the nicer-to-have improvements. Esoteric. Adjective. Understood by only a small group with special knowledge. The club told esoteric jokes about old radio valves that left newcomers polite and blank. Pedantic. Adjective. Focused too much on small rules or details. His feedback sounded pedantic when he corrected every comma, until he explained that tiny ambiguities had caused expensive mistakes in past contracts. Alacrity. Noun. Eager readiness to act. With surprising alacrity, the crew jumped into the sudden downpour, dragging tarps over the speakers and guiding the crowd toward the doors without panic. Adroit. Adjective. Clever and skillful in action or thought. He was adroit with rope, and the tent held fast through the storm. Foremost. Adjective. First in rank or importance. Her foremost worry was the fever, not the messy house. Venerate. Verb. To regard someone or something with deep respect. Each spring the village still venerates the stone arch by the river, laying wildflowers where floodwaters once parted around its worn keystone. Incidental. Adjective. Minor, a side part of something larger. The torn map was incidental. They found the cabin by the smell of wood smoke. Reticent. Adjective. Not revealing thoughts or feelings easily. Reticent by nature, she listened through the whole meeting, then quietly emailed a clear summary that solved the confusion everyone had been circling. Scathing. Adjective. Criticizing someone or something very harshly. The review was scathing about the film's pacing, comparing the second act to waiting for a late train in an empty station with broken departure boards. Laconic. Adjective. Using very few words, often in a way that feels blunt or cool. When asked what went wrong, his laconic answer blamed black ice on the approach. Then silence fell across the bridge table as everyone replayed the last hand. Reprieve. Noun. A short break from something hard or unpleasant. The first warm day in March felt like a reprieve from winter, and she opened every window. Sagacious. Adjective. Having wise judgment built from experience. His sagacious advice was to focus on the customer journey first, because clever features would not matter if people felt lost early on. Anticipate. Verb. To foresee and prepare for what may come. We anticipated rain and lashed a tarp over the packs, so the downpour only drummed us to sleep. Coherent. Adjective. Logical and consistent in a way that is easy to follow. Her report was coherent from start to finish, tying each recommendation to a clear risk and a realistic timeline for addressing it. Explicit. Adjective. Stated clearly and directly, leaving little room for doubt. Her instructions were explicit, including what to do if the primary contact was unavailable and how to document each step for the next shift. Novel. Adjective. Fresh and strikingly new. She tried a novel way to pit cherries, using a chopstick and a bottle, and juice stained the whole counter. Duplicity. Noun. Dishonest behavior that hides the truth by saying one thing and doing another. Once the emails surfaced, the duplicity of praising safety in public while cutting night inspections became impossible to excuse. Blunt. Adjective. Direct, to the point of seeming rude. Her blunt message ended the debate, but it also left the room tense because no one felt invited to ask questions. Languid. Adjective. Slow and relaxed, often from heat or tiredness. In the languid afternoon, the river moved like thick glass, and even the children's laughter seemed softened by the heavy honeyed air. Constitute. Verb. To form or make up a whole. Those quiet habits constitute most of her mornings: tea, light, and a few pages of a book. Ebullient. Adjective. Full of cheerful energy and enthusiasm. The ebullient conductor bounced on the podium, coaxing a shy community orchestra into a finale that rattled the folding chairs and brought the hall to its feet. Obdurate. Adjective. Stubbornly refusing to change an opinion or course. He remained obdurate even after the evidence shifted and the negotiation stalled, until someone reframed the problem in terms he could accept without losing face. Empirical. Adjective. Based on observation or experiment, not on guesswork alone. They ran an empirical test, 2 soils, same seeds, and they logged what sprouted each week. Resilient. Adjective. Able to recover quickly from difficulty. After the grant was rejected, the resilient team regrouped, rewrote the proposal, and secured funding from a different foundation. Falter. Verb. To weaken or stumble for a moment. Her voice did not falter when she named what she needed. Allocate. Verb. To set aside resources for a particular purpose. They decided to allocate more time to testing, even if it meant shipping fewer features, because reliability was the brand's advantage. Consequence. Noun. A result that follows from an action or decision. He weighed the consequence of leaving the windows open, rain on the sill, ruined books, and the smell of wet paper for days. Enervate. Verb. To drain strength or energy from. The humid heat enervated everyone on the platform until the late train finally rolled in. Atone. Verb. To do something to make up for a wrong. To atone for breaking the neighbor's window with an errant baseball, he swept the glass carefully and helped replant the bed where shards had scattered among the herbs. Alleviate. Verb. To ease pain, trouble, or hardship. Cool cloths and shade helped alleviate the fever until the nurse arrived with proper medicine. Impetus. Noun. A force or event that makes something happen or progress. The unexpected customer letter provided the impetus for redesigning the onboarding flow because it described confusion the team had stopped noticing. Complacent. Adjective. Too satisfied with the current situation to notice problems. After a streak of easy wins, they became complacent, and the first serious competitor exposed gaps they had stopped paying attention to. Conspicuous. Adjective. Easy to notice because it stands out. His conspicuous silence during the vote signaled disagreement, especially when he usually spoke early and with certainty. Audacious. Adjective. Bold in a confident, sometimes surprising way. It was an audacious proposal to cut the product line in half, but the argument was detailed enough that the board took it seriously. Circumspect. Adjective. Careful to avoid risks or saying too much. He was circumspect during the interview, answering warmly but pausing to choose words that would not betray colleagues who were not there to defend themselves. Prerogative. Noun. A right or privilege that belongs to a particular person or role. It was the director's prerogative to approve the final cut, but she still invited the whole crew to a screening and listened carefully to their notes. Benevolent. Adjective. Kind and willing to help others. The benevolent neighbor noticed the lights were out, carried over a lantern and a pot of soup, and stayed long enough to make the apartment feel safe again. Pivotal. Adjective. So important that it influences what happens next. Choosing the left fork at the ruined signpost proved pivotal. An hour later they emerged onto a bluff where eagles circled over the river. Facetious. Adjective. Joking during a serious moment, often inappropriately. His facetious line at the service drew stares, and he stared at his shoes for the rest of the hour. Conservative. Adjective. Careful, avoiding big risk. They made a conservative guess at drive time and left an hour early. Plausible. Adjective. Seeming reasonable or likely to be true. Her explanation sounded plausible until the timeline was compared with the security logs, which showed she could not have been there. Articulate. Adjective. Able to express ideas clearly and effectively. Despite the pressure of the live interview, she stayed articulate, explaining the policy change in plain terms while still acknowledging its difficult trade-offs. Candid. Adjective. Truthful and straightforward in a way that may be surprising. During the performance review, her candid feedback was uncomfortable at first, but it gave him a clear path to improve. Expedite. Verb. To make an action or process happen sooner or with less delay. To expedite the passport renewal, she paid for overnight shipping, triple-checked the photo rules, and uploaded documents before the office opened. Trenchant. Adjective. Forceful, clear, and effective in a way that cuts through confusion. Her trenchant closing argument tied each piece of evidence to a single timeline, leaving the jury with a story that felt both simple and complete. Paradox. Noun. Two truths that clash yet can both be real. The paradox of winter camping is that the cold air feels sharper when the sky is perfectly clear. Credulity. Noun. A readiness to believe too easily. The hoax relied on credulity, and anyone who read the fine date laughed first. Disparity. Noun. A clear gap, often one that feels unfair. There was a disparity between the two gardens. One was bare mud, the other bright with tulips. Eloquent. Adjective. Expressing ideas clearly and persuasively. His eloquent toast balanced humor and gratitude, and even the quiet relatives at the far end of the table leaned in to listen. Conscientious. Adjective. Careful to do what is right and thorough. A conscientious supervisor reviewed the safety checklist with new staff, not because it was exciting, but because it prevented avoidable injuries. Misconstrue. Verb. To interpret something in the wrong way. She worried colleagues would misconstrue her quietness as disapproval, so she followed up with a note explaining she was still processing. Fortify. Verb. To strengthen something against problems or attack. To fortify the plan. They added a backup vendor and a clear escalation process for nights when shipments ran late. Inadvertent. Adjective. Happening without intention or planning. Her inadvertent reply all turned a private question into a group discussion, and she spent the afternoon smoothing over the confusion. Mundane. Adjective. Plain or everyday, yet often quietly important. Folding laundry is mundane work, yet steady hands keep a household from chaos. Repute. Noun. The general opinion people have about someone or something. The baker's repute traveled ahead of him. Strangers stepped into the shop and inhaled cinnamon before they reached the counter. Obscure. Adjective. Not well known or hard to understand. The footpath sign was obscure, its arrows scratched and pale. They guessed wrong twice before a farmer pointed them toward the stile. Panacea. Noun. A remedy claimed to solve every problem, often unrealistically. Treating the new software like a panacea, the district rushed adoption without training, and teachers soon traded one kind of chaos for another. Incisive. Adjective. Clearly and intelligently analyzing what is important. Her incisive questions revealed gaps in the proposal, and the team left with a sharper understanding of what still needed work. Discernment. Noun. The ability to judge well, especially in subtle situations. Choosing fabric for curtains took discernment. In the shop, the samples looked alike until she held them beside the window and watched the grain change. Reluctant. Adjective. Unwilling or hesitant to act. He was reluctant to accept the promotion until he understood how it would affect his time with family and his ability to stay hands-on. Extrinsic. Adjective. Coming from outside rather than from within. Sticker charts are extrinsic rewards. The child may still learn to read for the story's sake alone. Fastidious. Adjective. Very careful about small details and standards. Fastidious about presentation. She polished each glass until the candlelight looked clean and steady, then aligned the place cards with a ruler. Brevity. Noun. Shortness of speech or writing that keeps only what matters. Her email was a model of brevity. 3 sentences that named the decision, the reason, and the next step, so no one had to guess what to do. Proficient. Adjective. Skilled and capable at doing something. Within a few months, she became proficient with the tools, not by rushing, but by practicing deliberately and asking targeted questions. Feasible. Adjective. Possible to do successfully with available resources. The timeline felt ambitious, but it was feasible once they reduced unnecessary steps and assigned clear ownership for each deliverable. Mitigate. Verb. To reduce the severity of harm or risk. The plan mitigated risk by adding staged rollouts, clear rollback steps, and a short window for monitoring unexpected behavior. Egalitarian. Adjective. Based on the belief that people deserve equal rights and opportunities. The co-op adopted an egalitarian rule for chores, rotating the least popular tasks so resentment did not pool around the same few members. Incentive. Noun. Something that motivates a person to take action. The strongest incentive was not the bonus, but the promise of autonomy and the chance to lead a project end to end. Disclose. Verb. To reveal what was hidden or private. He had to disclose the crack in the canoe's hull before anyone paddled beyond the calm bay. Contiguous. Adjective. Sharing a border, next to and touching. The 2 lots were contiguous, so one straight fence ran between the gardens. Sordid. Adjective. Morally dirty or unpleasant in a way that feels degrading. The article avoided sensationalism, but the sordid details of the scheme still turned the stomach, especially when the victims described what it cost them. Concede. Verb. To admit something reluctantly, especially after debate. After reviewing the data together, he conceded that the earlier forecast was too optimistic, even though he disliked changing course publicly. Ignoble. Adjective. Not honorable, shameful in character. Pocketing cash from the tip jar felt ignoble, and he brought the bills back the next morning. Dichotomy. Noun. A sharp split into 2 opposed sides. They faced the dichotomy of speed versus care on the icy road and chose care. Abate. Verb. To become less strong or intense. When the wind began to abate, the sea's surface smoothed, and fishermen stepped back onto the pier with cautious relief and damp collars. Efficacy. Noun. Power to produce the result you want. The new allergy pill had real efficacy. Within an hour her eyes stopped itching and the room looked clear again. Cachet. Noun. Prestige or distinction people recognize. The tiny bakery earned cachet when the paper praised its sourdough on the front page. Placid. Adjective. Calm and peaceful, with little movement or excitement. The lake looked placid at dawn, mist hugging the reeds while a lone rower cut a slow line that rippled outward and vanished. Intrinsic. Adjective. Built into something, part of its core nature. Warmth was intrinsic to that little kitchen, where bread rose and steam fogged the windows. Attenuate. Verb. To reduce the strength or intensity of something. To attenuate the glare. She taped thin paper over the lampshade, and the harsh corner of the studio softened into a warm pool of light. Disquiet. Noun. A feeling of unease that makes you restless or concerned. A low disquiet settled over the audience as the speaker avoided the simplest questions, and people shifted in their seats as if the air had cooled. Ubiquitous. Adjective. Present or found almost everywhere. By the time they arrived, the ubiquitous scent of roasted coffee had drifted through the entire market, pulling people toward the small kiosk. Anachronism. Noun. A person or thing that seems to belong to another time. A payphone on the pier felt like an anachronism next to tourists filming gulls on their phones. Denigrate. Verb. To criticize someone or something unfairly. To belittle. It became a habit to denigrate the rival team's luck, but the coach reminded players that disrespect made them sloppy and blind to real weaknesses. Convene. Verb. To bring people together for a formal meeting or purpose. After the spring flood, the mayor convened neighbors in the school gym, maps spread under fluorescent lights and coffee steaming in paper cups. Anomalous. Adjective. Strange, out of step with the usual pattern. One anomalous warm week in January fooled the buds, and frost later blackened them. Credible. Adjective. Worthy of belief, because it is supported by evidence. His proposal sounded credible because he referenced prior results, outlined assumptions openly, and identified what data could still prove him wrong. Ostensible. Adjective. Named as the reason while the fuller story may differ. The ostensible plan was a picnic, but everyone knew we were really scouting the eclipse viewing spot. Serene. Adjective. Calm and untroubled in a way that feels steady. The rain eased into a soft hush, and she felt serene by the open window, breathing evenly as the streetlights blurred into warm halos. Saturate. Verb. To fill something completely until no more can be absorbed. Rain began to saturate the clay soil until puddles held perfect brief mirrors of the barn roof. Consolidate. Verb. To combine separate parts into a single whole. She consolidated 3 shoeboxes of letters into one cedar chest. Ephemeral. Adjective. Brief as a breath, gone almost as soon as it appears. Morning frost on the pumpkin vines was ephemeral. Sun erased it before breakfast. Propensity. Noun. A natural tendency to behave in a particular way. His propensity for arriving early turned the kitchen into a quiet ritual of grinding beans and setting out mugs before the rest of the household stirred. Uplift. Verb. To lift spirits or improve a mood. The choir's harmony uplifted everyone in the stone church. Rectify. Verb. To fix a problem by correcting what is wrong. Once the billing error was found, the company moved quickly to rectify it, issuing refunds and explaining how they would prevent repeats. Ambiguity. Noun. Meaning that can be read more than one way. The sign's ambiguity made drivers guess, merge now or merge later. Exemplify. Verb. To be a clear example of. The meal exemplified comfort food, thick soup, brown bread, butter melting into both. Incur. Verb. To bring something bad on yourself by what you do. He incurred a sunburn by skipping sunscreen at noon. definitive. Adjective. Authoritative, settling doubt. The field guide offered a definitive description of the mushroom.